everyone. Welcome to another episode of Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson, and today we are talking about everyone's favorite, or maybe not so favorite, but hopefully it's improving topic slash feature in Visual Studio, which is good old hot reload. So joining me today to talk about that is Kevin Bost, who's a Microsoft MVP. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Leslie. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. So before we dive in, tell us a little about yourself. What are you working on these days?
Yeah. So Microsoft MVP. I do a lot of open source development. I'm streaming live coding on Twitch and YouTube. If people find that interesting, my bread and butter is a lot of XAML, WPF related technologies or similar. So some people may have come across my content related to that. Recently, Aspire has grabbed my attention, and I absolutely love it for building out cloud native applications. So that's very much been uh, my go-to, and I'm a Windows-based user, so obviously Visual Studio for my tool chain for everything.
Cool. Sounds good. I love good old Aspire, formerly
Yes.
known as .NET Aspire.
Yes.
Awesome. So, hot reload, that's something that I think a lot of us
Yeah.
use with varying degrees of success, historically speaking. Can you share a
Absolutely
little bit
varying
more about
degrees of success. It has a fairly long history, depending on when people first encountered it. They may know the term edit and continue as kind of that older name for what a lot of the feature was. I mean, the promise has always been there and people have wanted it. Web developers have kind of been spoiled, and a lot of kind of those interpreted languages have often had that really tight dev loop of I make some edits and I don't have to restart anything. I just see the changes live, right?
that?
That is the promise of hot reload is that really tight dev inner loop of I can just quickly make a change, see the impact of it, and we're off to the races. Now, compiled languages it's harder because they aren't interpreted, like, they actually have to there's a compile step in there, and so getting that working really well in C# has kind of been a long journey, and I don't think the journey's over, but it has significantly improved, especially with Visual Studio 2026. So, we've got
Yeah.
some cool demos to show that we'll jump into here in just a second.
Yep. Yeah, so, like, I've seen some noticeable differences with those new improvements as of, VS 2026, which is exciting, but for those who maybe haven't, upgraded or updated to the latest versions of VS, what are some of those common frustrations that people have experienced with Hot Reload in the past?
Yeah, I think the big thing, and I think the term that gets used a lot in the docs is the concept of like a rude edit, right? Is with inside of C sharp, the hot reload um, looks at the changes that you're making to the code, figures out what changes functionally down at the IL level need to be changed, and then applies those hot. Uh, Effectively, as the name implies, of being able to go through and do that. But there's some of those changes that just are either aren't supported yet or are a lot more difficult to deal with. You've made some major change. That's not just a hey, we're going to tweak some instructions inside of a method body. That's a we've changed everything. Right. And so with some of the VS 2026 updates, they've started bringing in more edits that you can make without causing one of those root edits. I think inside of your editor, people will be familiar with, and I'm trying to remember if 2022 did this, but 2026 is a purple squiggle, right? You make
Mm,
an edit that hot reload can't handle, and you get the little purple squiggle under there saying, hey, your edit's fine, but you've done something too complex or unsupported that hot reload isn't going to be able to actually go through and make that automatic change for. There's also been a bunch of changes around like razor files inside of
oh,
2026
yeah.
just to make that performance work well because it has I will say been shaky over the years. And it's again, I don't think we're all the way there. There's still a nice list of things that are unsupported. And so there's more work that can certainly go in to make that experience better and better. Again, we want the dream of I just edit the file and I see my app working perfectly. That's the gold North Star dream. I don't know that we'll ever get all the way there, but I do
Get
suspect
close.
we're going to keep seeing more and more updates coming with fewer rude edits, less purple squigglies. That way we can actually kind of see the way that goes.
Totally. And I think also one gripe that I also get frustrated with sometimes is just the inconsistent performance of it all sometimes too. Like, I used to work on the Razor team, and yeah, that was always one of the biggest complaints when it came to hot reload, where it's like, "You're just making a minor text change." Like, you're just changing the title on a web page. Be simple, should take, like, less than a second to apply via hot reload, but instead it's taking multiple seconds or minutes depending on your load.
Right, you start questioning if I could kill and recompile quicker than this.
Right, yeah, I think I was better off stopping and restarting
Right.
my debugging session or whatever.
And
So
that is something that has been added in 2026, because I think some people have kind of gotten into that mentality of I'm just going to kill it, restart it, run again. There is now actually an MS Build property that you can set on your projects or in a props file if you want that will actually do a restart on a root edit. That way, you don't have to actually spend your time stop, recompile, relaunch, like just to have the system do it, right? If I'm making these edits, it's because I want this change to happen. I've
yeah,
moved away from my debugging session or testing that I was doing, recompile, relaunch my app, and I'll get back in and get whole thing going, which
exactly.
is certainly a lot nicer.
Definitely trying to streamline
Yeah,
any way you can.
exactly.
Cool.
Um,
So we're gonna show
Perfect.
something
Yeah,
else off?
if you wanna bounce over, let me show that, property here real quick. So this is the Visual Studio 2026 release notes, and here is the auto restart on root edits, property that you can actually end up going through and change. So hot reload, auto restart. So you can put it in your project file, or again, it's just an MS Build property, so it could end up living inside of like a props file or similar, just so that you get that kind of streamlined thing. Because for some people, I think that's what they want. They like that kind of clean reset when I'm making edits. And so it does give you that behavior. And there was a bunch of performance and reliability changes called out. One other thing that I did want to point out. So this is akams.net hot reload. You there, this is very dependent upon your version of .NET that you're on, right? Most of the time, you're going to have to be on a modernish version. Net 6 is kind of where things start to feel nice and useful again. When you start looking at things, you will find that kind of Net 8 is that area where you'll probably start getting the best feature parity across a lot of things. But there is just a straight list of unsupported scenarios. And a lot of these kind of make sense. Is this is meant for a debug type build. This isn't a release build type situation. If you've got things like optimizations, trimming, that kind of stuff that you get in release builds, hot reload isn't going to work. I think for some people that's a hang up that they run into is they don't realize that they've got various optimizations or otherwise turned on to their builds, and then hot reload just doesn't work, and it's not really clear why. Right. So again, modern.net, make sure that you're running in full um, debug builds. And then the last thing that I wanted to point out is and it's at least on GitHub, it's still listed under the edit and continue supported edits. But depending on your Visual Studio version, you're going to get sort of a very different behavior as far as what's considered a root edit and what's um, acceptable and what you can actually get away with doing. So I tend to run insider builds on my Visual Studio. I love them. I find them to be very stable and useful, and I always want the latest stuff. So every Tuesday or every other Tuesday, I'm updating my Visual Studio, and it's great. I got new toys, new things to play with. But if you are running into hot reload problems, do be aware that if you are forced to use an older version of Visual Studio for whatever reason, that there will be again a somewhat of a degraded feature set depending on how old of a version that we're talking about. So just kind of set the stage there. So for this year, I've got a very simple WPF application. I said at the beginning, I love my XAML. I love my WPF. I know it's over 2 decades old, but darn it, I still love it. I can't let it go. So if I fire it up, we can kind of see in the live preview. It's a very simple application. There's a button. We go click, click, click. Right. We get to 5, and it goes, oh, that's as far as we're gonna go. We can go through and clear it, and do it all over again.
Mhm.
Fine. It's a fairly simple application. And if we go through, and I'm gonna collapse some of these things down here to give me a little more screen real estate. We can see that the commands down here basically align with that behavior, right? The I'll spare people looking at the actual XAML unless people are really interested. But the command just calls increment count, which plus plus. And then when we get up to 5, that's where we say we can no longer count anymore because I'm a math minor. I can only count on one hand. I would need a math major if I needed to use the other hand. I think that's the rule of what I learned while I was at university. It was something like that.
It checks out.
Yeah, sure. My professors are probably groaning a little bit, but that's okay. It's okay. I had good ones.
Well, I figured after a point, you don't even need numbers, period, because you're just dealing with the Greek alphabet after
Right.
the point.
Like half
So,
half of math becomes letters anyway, and so
yeah,
you're doing operations with just putting letters together. So,
it's fine. Yeah, it
which
makes
is
sense.
great.
Nice.
It's exactly what programming is. Um, so to make sure that we actually have hot reload up and going, the first thing I want to point out is this little button right here. This is the magical hot reload, make my changes get applied. If you are not seeing that, where you want to go first is tools options. And then I've already got my thing filtered down. Search for hot reload and then it'll be underneath debugging right here. And then you'll want to check .NET, assuming you're running in the .NET space. And then if you're like me and you're running XAML-based stuff, you want to check the XAML hot reload one as well. And just make sure that you actually do have hot reload enabled. Now, I like to click the button because I like to kind of be in control of when that apply happens. Um, but if you let's kill this just so the buttons light up again. Go back. Thank you. If you do want those things automatically applied for you, you can always check the box in here for apply on save. That way, as you save the files, it just automatically pushes it out.
Yeah, I'm a safe
Feels
person personally, but
Yeah, I was gonna say
oh,
to each his own. Like it depends on what you're doing. Sometimes I kick myself and go, oh, I don't like the extra button clicks, and then sometimes I put on save, and I have muscle memory that just goes Control S all the time.
that's true. Yeah.
It's sometimes a little too
Yep.
aggressive, so I go back and forth. I don't trust the muscle memory in my fingers.
Fair.
Um, and then very similar on the XAML hot reload as well. Again, make sure you've got it enabled, and then depending on what XAML flavor you are working with, make sure that you actually have uh, the appropriate options turned on. Right. In our case, this is a WPF app, so this is my key checkbox that's here, and then just my XAML and the live visual tree I find to be very handy. Just especially if you're bringing in a lot of like control libraries and templates, it kind of filters out a little bit of the noise and just keeps it down to the stuff that you've written rather than see it all. Again, this one I toggle on and off depending on what I'm doing. I'm a control library author, so sometimes I actually do like to see all of that stuff. Goes back and forth. Depends on the day. Today is a Tuesday, so it's gonna be checked. I think
Yeah,
that's the
makes
way
sense.
that's the way that's gonna go. So, let's go ahead and launch this guy real quick, and just to kinda give a very simplistic thing of being able to show this. So, right here, this is just gonna be a plus equals 1 if I go through and change this guy out to a 2, and then I'm gonna hit the hot reload button here, and then if I come in here and click, not surprising, it works. Huzzah,
Yeah.
right? We're able to go past 5 because we're counting past 2 and all of that stuff, and that's
Mhm.
great. One thing that I don't think people always realize is this actually works without the debugger, right? So you don't have to actually be in a debugging session. So I'm going to put this guy back for a second and then just recompile. Um, and then I'm going to go, we'll go up here and we'll just do start without debugging. Normally I go control F5, but it's hard for you to see my fingers. So we'll go that route. Right? And so if I click here, right, 1, 2, 3, makes sense. And then if I come over here and switch this guy to a 2, save it. And then once again, you'll note I do still have my hot reload button, even though I'm not in a debug session, right? And so we can go ahead and apply those changes. And then if I come in here, I'm going to go bing, 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 and up we go.
Sweet. I actually
Awesome.
didn't know you could use Hot Reload without, the bugger attached. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it is one of those times where I mean, I often will launch things without necessarily attaching the debugger to everything, and then you realize partway through, "Ah, shoot, I need that." So I
Right.
go, actually, it still does work, for most app types that you're gonna be working on to be able to go through and leverage it, which is awesome. So again, if you see the hot reload button up there, you do have that option of being able to push it. And I will also mention too, again, if you want that kind of restart application flow so that you don't have to do the whole stop, shut down, whole run through that kind of thing, you are
Gotcha.
off to the races there. Um, the one other kind of really cool thing here is we can actually go a step further than this, right? Like,
Mm.
um, so you'll note when I go through and change this back down to a one, right? So I'm going to hit save. And then we will, let me see. I want to push this guy. Let me flap my windows just so I can have these things side by side for a second. Come on. Big window. It's not the window we wanted. Oh, Visual Studio, you are making my life hard. Thank you for I know how to resize windows. I am a developer.
I
Okay.
can't do it when I'm put on the spot personally, like, dragging and dropping is an anxiety of mine when I'm doing a conference.
Exactly. When I hit the hot reload here, so you'll note it applied, but a couple things all happened, right? It went back down to 0 clicks, and I kinda intentionally skimmed over that before because
Mhm.
if you were to take this kinda demo application and run it just out of the box, you would not see that behavior of going back to 0 clicks, right? Which is we can actually go through and extend the hot reload system inside of our own code. And this is actually really critical if you have things like caches or otherwise, where when hot reload gets applied, you actually want to be able to go through and maybe clear some caches, change some data, reload some files, whatever might be affecting it. So over here on the side, I have this hot reload service. And the key thing here is this metadata update handler attribute, where you end up just giving it any arbitrary type. And this is very much duck typing of it needs to have the following members: your update application event, clear cache, and then update application. And the other really cool thing here as well is it goes through and it actually tells you which types inside of your application hot reload is making updates to. So if you need to do something conditional of, well, okay, if the hot reload is applying to, my view model, I'm going to do one thing. If it's applying to some backend service, I'm going to do something else, right? You can start to build out some very interesting logic inside of here. But you'll note this is also a static class, right? All of this stuff is static because the thread that's going to run is coming from the runtime for you to be able to find this class and invoke it when that hot reload is getting applied. So what I have done is I've wired myself up to this event inside of my view models constructor. So right here, I am watching for when my application is updated. I am going to go through and update the count property on my view model back to 0. Just in this case, because if we were already at 5 or whatever it has, it's like by not resetting it, it kind of leaves the button in a weird state at times.
Sure.
And so here we can actually so I'm treating my count property as just an individual cache.
So,
We can
in
now
this
go,
case, real
yeah.
clarifying question,
Mhm.
this only works if you're in debug mode, so if you were doing it
No,
without debugging
it
or
works
worse
in
than both?
both.
Okay,
It works
cool,
in
'cause I'll
both.
have
Now,
to
it d
remove that.
so it d or let me rephrase. Uh, it only works with a debug compilation, but
Gotcha.
this code will still be executed if I'm attached with a debugger or without a debugger. I think I may have misunderstood earlier.
Cool.
So, but yes,
That
no,
makes sense.
exactly. So anytime hot reload is applied to the application, this method ends up being invoked for you. And in this case, we're just going to raise the event, and my view model is watching for the event. And normally you might do something like, if types, I can spell types contains, type of main view model, then maybe we'll only do this here rather than just blindly always making the edit.
Mhm.
Um, and ironically, we can hot reload that change
Nice.
through the hot reload system with hot reload, which is even better. The other thing to be acutely aware of, especially if you're doing UI based stuff like WPF, is that this is a background thread that is coming in on it. It's coming from the runtime. And so in my case, you very much do have to reach out and grab an application dispatcher or otherwise to be able to make this change. Just so that you have all of that. The other thing is there is that subtle switch from being able to go from something that's static to a particular instance, right? So in this case,
Right.
I'm registering up on a static event, but this Lambda here is an instance on this particular view model. If we go through, because we'll launch with debugging here real quick, we can actually wire up and catch this partway through. So if we come down here and say, okay, we're going to do a two save, and then we will apply hot reload, doo-doo-doo, we now land right inside of our update handler. So we can even
Mhm.
take a look here and see. And so right up here, the thread that we're coming on is this .NET TP worker. I'm sure somebody smarter than me will be able to tell you what that stands for.
I was about
Um,
to ask, and
yeah. Well,
we saw that.
I'm gonna go with thread pool worker thread that's coming
Oh,
in
this is good.
from the runtime. But it is important to note it is a background thread, not an STA or UI thread.
Mm.
And so in this case, we'll come in here. We can see if we look at our list of types that it's gonna my thing is gonna play not nice with me. That main window view model is in fact the type that we made an edit to. So if we
Mhm.
want to make some sort of intelligent decision inside of our app of, hey, if it's not the main window, maybe we don't touch it, that kind of thing. But then we let it go and our clicks go back down to 0. So just as an easy way of being able to handle your application. So when leveraging hot reload, if there are those situations where something needs to be cleared, some extra data should probably be reloaded or reset as part of that hot reload as you're going through it, this is just an added way of kind of being able to tighten up that dev loop. I sort of equate it a lot to in WPF applications, we'll do like dev data sources specifically for either the designer or sometimes I'll even leverage them as the running of the app while I'm building out a UI just so that I have that quick turnaround. This is effectively the hot reload extension point to be able to do that fancier stuff so that while you have that tight reload or that tight dev loop, the reloading of your data can be done as well. Because in this case, we're landing on the initial screen of my app, but I might be working on something that's 3 or 4 layers deep. And I may not want to actually spend a lot of time going through clicking, navigating into, I got to
Right.
find the right user, get into the right screen. This gives me a
Yeah,
way to tweak that and stay in that tight dev
'cause I
loop
was gonna say
and leverage hot
that's
reload.
really good. Like, I didn't know you could do this because yeah, it is tedious if you were, like, trying to
Mhm.
figure out one specific section of your app or whatever, and then it requires all these, extra
Yep,
clicks to get back to there. Like,
exactly.
yeah, and this is just an available library that anybody can
This
use
is
and
built
apply to?
right in. So yeah, so this
Nice.
metadata
Just
update
metadata.
handler. Yeah, again, modern versions of .NET, updated Visual Studio, all the things, but in my case, this is a .NET 10 based application. So it's just underneath the system reflection metadata namespace. And again, you just need to give it a type that appropriately matches the signature. So, and this thing is also spelled out those same doc pages that I'm sure we'll have the links for in the description. They call out this exact same structure as a way of being able to do it. And again, a lot of the use cases around this tend to focus around either data or caching or otherwise things that you might not be able to update. For things like WPF or Razor pages, like those frameworks will typically handle the stuff you would expect. Theming changes, brushes, that kind of stuff is usually handled for you. You don't usually have to drop into managing that. This is more for managing your applications level stuff to get it all in there and going. So does make for a really awesome extensibility point and can, at least in my experience, cut down on that dev time of being able to work on
Yeah.
something. So
That's great, yeah, because when hot reload works, which it should work a lot more in the later VS versions nowadays, both from a perf standpoint and from a consistency standpoint. On top of that, being able to customize how things get reloaded, is really nice and, great productivity
it
enhancer there.
absolutely is. And I think that's one of the things that I've leveraged quite a bit is I think some people intrinsically have kind of figured it out that the changes that hot reload can do the easiest are the ones that are usually constrained inside of a method rather than kind of those bigger changes.
Yeah,
right?
like, if you're changing, like, a class name or a method signature, usually
Yeah.
that's when I get yelled at by
Yeah, so I oftentimes to do comment and then tell Copilot, "No, don't do this yet. Be patient. We'll have your turn in a minute." And then, go through and keep my changes kind of tightly scoped while I'm doing that fast loop, and then when I'm done,
Mm.
"Okay, Copilot, go ahead and do all the to-dos that I just left behind. I need those."
That's a great point, I think for especially when you're working with Copilot because, yeah,
Mhm.
making sure it sticks to those constraints so you can continue to be as productive instead of
Yep.
Copilot spinning its wheels for longer than it needs to.
Right,
It
yeah,
also
it is
did
not
that.
nearly as respective of what Hot Reload's capabilities are, and so it's perfectly
Mhm.
happy to make whatever edits you ask it to. It's like, "Well, hold on.
Yeah.
We gotta keep this a little tighter for this loop, and then you can have your turn in a minute." So, but yeah, so that is Hot Reload in VS 2026. If people have had poor experiences with it in the past, I would tell you to give it another shot, give it a fresh pass. Again, it doesn't handle everything, but it handles significantly more. Again, especially if you're up on latest.net with the latest version of
Mhm.
2026. It can actually be quite effective, even without a debugger, or if you've got something custom you want to do inside of your app. The options are there, and now you're just limited by what you want to build.
Totally. And, something that you didn't mention back when you were showing the release notes and how to, like, set in your CS proj file
Mhm.
the setting that, basically will run the hot reloads
Yeah,
or rerun your program if there's, like, a root edit encountered. Uh, what's great about that is that that only applies to the projects that are impacted by that change. So if you
yeah.
are somebody sitting there with a big solution of hundreds or tens of hundreds of projects and you make a change that's only going to impact one of them instead of all of them restarting, which historically has resulted in long wait times to boot up debugging or do a hot reload. It's just going to impact that one process, which is really good.
Yeah.
Very like much
No,
more efficient.
I think of a lot of my Aspire-based applications that have a dozen
Right.
projects in there that are all firing up and running. If I only have to restart 2 or 3 of them, that's significantly better than, you know, bringing down my entire session and starting up something new.
Totally. It's just like overkill otherwise.
Exactly, exactly. But yeah,
Great.
again, hot reload, go out, give it a try. It's absolutely worth it.
Totally agree. And, if you need to update to the latest Visual Studio and you haven't yet, you totally should. I we also host release parties where we go through everything new in each new monthly release of Visual Studio. So check those out if you're still on the fence. Maybe there's a feature that catches your eye. But also it's free if you use Community. If you use the Insiders build, you can use VS for free. So just go try it out. And yeah, with that, Kevin, thanks so much for sharing the new and improved hot reload experience. Heck, I didn't even know it could do some of the, the stuff that it could do, um, especially outside of the main debugging loop and things. So that's really cool.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me on again, Leslie.
Yeah, likewise. Hope to see you back soon. I'm sure we will.
Excellent.
Cool. All right. And to everyone else, thanks for watching. Go try the new and improved hot reload and happy coding.
Happy coding.